Hey guys, this is Andrew from ThinkAside. I wanted to, change the scenery a little bit. I know we've been recording a lot in my basement. It's actually my work area. But today I wanted to talk a little bit about a few different things, specifically bad debt versus good debt. And I think a lot of the times we think of debt and we think of bad, right? We associate it with what I think we're kind of preconditioned to think about, which is that all debt is going to get you into to, to trouble. It's going to burden you and it's going to bring you down because you're constantly paying these payments, right? And it's affecting your credit and all these things, which makes sense. Like it's very normal to think that way. I thought that way for a very long time, and it wasn't until I had seen something from Rich Dad Poor Dad that it kind of changed my perspective on that. Is that there can be good debt, and because of the society we live in, which is an inflationary society, it's actually that good debt is normal. That is how rich people got rich oftentimes, and that is how rich people get richer is through having good debt. So what is good debt versus bad debt? Well, bad debt is, of course, if you go out and you sign a contract to lease a car or you buy a car, you know what I mean? You take out a loan on a car. So now that car, you have it, you're using it every day, you're putting wear on it, you're not making money off of it, and you're using it. Yes, it's for your benefit. Yeah, it's convenient, but it's oftentimes not necessary because you could have a cheaper car. You could buy a car for, a few $1,000s and then you wouldn't be in debt whatsoever or be in very minimal debt because there is a point where convenience comes into play and you could argue things like that. But in general, because of that car, it becomes a liability, is how oftentimes a car is considered because it's not making you any money. Yeah, it's making you money if you're getting from point A to point D to B to work and things like that, but you're not making it as an asset. It's not considered that same kind of aspect. That's why, like, even for a lot of, at least the state of Maine, when you apply for any sort of benefits of any kind, like Maine Care and things like that, you can have one primary vehicle and it won't count as an asset. It's not until you have two, three, multiple vehicles that then they become assets because they're no longer what is needed. Now they're you could be using them for making money, plowing roads and things like that. And that's part of it, is if that truck was being used for plowing driveways and things like that, then now that's an asset because it's making you money. Or you're renting your car out, now that becomes an asset because it's making you money. But when you're using it and you're putting wear on it and it's costing you money per month, but it's not making you any money in that sense, then it is no longer an asset. It becomes a liability. And that's where bad debt is. It's the same thing as if you had, say, $300 or $1,000 in credit card debt and you're not benefiting from it. If you're building your credit, that's one thing, because that could be considered good debt, arguably, in the sense that it is achieving a goal, but it is still bad debt in the sense that that debt is not making you money. So then what is good debt? Good debt is things like if you take out a loan on a house, but you're taking that house and you're renting it out. So you rent it out for more money. So you take a mortgage and you pay, say you have to pay $500 a month on that mortgage, but now you're renting it out for $650 a month. So now there's a $150 profit. Of course, you have to include expenses and things like that, and that's where you want to make sure that you're still making more money in profit than you are paying per month, and that's good debt because it is making you money. So yes, you're in debt, but that debt is making you money. And of course, over time, what happens is because the inflationary society we live in, that debt loses value. And so every year that you go and you have that, say you take out a loan for $100,000. Now, in 1 year from now, if inflation is 15% per year, now that is now 15% less valuable. It's no longer 100,000, it's 15% less than that. And it's the same idea over time, assuming that you continue to, raise your price and things like that, then it's going to pay off even quicker than that. And so that's where good debt comes in. It's because of the society we live in. It's a lot of financial I don't want to say advisors, but a lot of financial people you see on YouTube and more of the knowledgeable ones, even books, things like that, they talk about how if you it's that rat race of where you take out debt and then well you go into debt, you take out big loans, and then that's kind of the race is you take out and you get into as much debt as possible to make as much money as possible because you may that debt is paying for the money you're making, right? Because you take out $100,000, you haven't paid it yet, but yet you're making $600-700 a month, and say you're only paying $200 a month on the loan. So that's that's all profit. And of course, there's different kinds. You could be renting out an apartment complex, or you could have a house, or a duplex, or you could be renting out the car. There's quite a few different things. You could be taking out a loan to build a business where the business is making you more money than you're paying on the loan. That's the idea of good debt. Unless you're going to take out your own money to build something, which is fine, but you don't generally want to say save up $300,000, your life savings, so to speak, to buy that house that you've been wanting to buy. That doesn't really make sense because what's happening then is that $300,000, you're fighting against inflation to get there. Once you finally get there, you buy that house for $300,000 at full value, and you don't give inflation a chance to do the magic that it does. And I say magic because it it's a benefit to the inflationary society, assuming you use it to your benefit. And that's the thing, is if you play the game to the rules that it has within that confines, and you can benefit from it, you can take advantage of it, and then you can do better. But if again, if you work for your entire life for $300,000 just to go and buy that house, now you're out $300,000 where you could have taken that $300,000 and put it into something that's not a liability like a house, because a house is considered a liability. I argue that it is still an asset, of course, but I wouldn't necessarily consider it much of an asset. It's one of those that I personally kind of argue that it is worth having your castle, so it is something that should be. It's good debt in the sense the benefits that it brings, but it is bad debt in the sense that it's not making you money unless you're renting it out, and that's a different story. And so that's kind of the trick that I think we oftentimes kind of don't realize, is that debt can be good. Debt is the solve to benefiting in the inflationary society we live in, but only when you get into good debt. Because if you get into bad debt, especially if you get into bad debt first, now you're in bad debt. You're paying everything you make every month to make more money, so you can pay more debt. You're not making money off that debt. So that's the difference between good debt and bad debt. So that's really the important thing to realize, and that's what I wanted to bring up today, is just to kind of spark a thought in the head, is that it's scary to going into debt, right? Because what if you take out that loan for something that's supposed to make you money and it doesn't? Things like that. Of course, that's it's a risk, it's a chance, but there's a point where risk needs to be taken, and so calculated risks is where that's come in, right? You have to account for the odds, and you have to play the odds. So just keep that in mind. I would say it goes alongside what we've been talking about, where inflation, deflation, things like that. In a deflationary society, you don't want to take debt. You don't want to go into debt because say you take out a loan, and this is just a quick side note, is that say you take out a loan for $100,000 in a deflationary society. Now you owe $100,000, but every year that $100,000 is harder to get, because in a deflationary society, you're making less money instead of more money over time. You're making less money, so what's happening then is it's making you further and further away from making that $100,000. And so it's a weird thing to kind of wrap your mind around, but again, in that inflationary society, the society we live in, or the economy we live in, it's the opposite. And so taking out that debt, it's going to lose value over time, and then you're going to ideally make more money even with minimum wages, right? Like, I remember when I first started working, when I was 19, I think, I got a job where I was making $7.75 or $7.50 or something like that an hour. Versus now, I make, well, you figure minimum wage, that was minimum wage. And now minimum wage is $13 an hour. So I'm making, say I was making minimum wage, I'd be making more money now than I was making then, just for doing the same bare minimum thing as possible. Meanwhile, that $100,000 that say I took out back then, now I'm closer to my goal because I'm making, you know, and so making more money. So that's kind of, again, that kind of goes back to good debt, bad debt. So say you take out that loan for the $100,000 and you buy a house, and you rent that house out. So now with that house being rented out, say you pay $500 every month on that mortgage, and then from there, say you're making $1,000 a month from the rent, right? You're charging $1,000 a month. So with expenses included, or whatever, say you're only making $100 a month, but the next year you go in and the inflation increases, right? Cost of living and stuff increases, and that debt stays the same. The $100,000 stays the same. It doesn't increase, right? You don't owe more interest and stuff like that, sure, but very minimal, especially right now. So you take that into account, and then next year, with all the expenses increasing and everything else, you raise the rent a little bit, right? Because they're making a little more money ideally, and that's where, of course, the wealth divide comes in, is because that doesn't always translate correctly. A lot of minimum wage people, they don't always make more money every year like inflation increases. And so ideally though, you're charging more money, and so you're getting closer and closer because you're paying off the debt quicker and quicker. And so it makes sense to keep that debt, and that's why it's good debt. Of course, over time you pay it off, and then you can even leverage against that debt, that asset that you have, and you can buy another asset with that, and then you just keep doing that over and over and over. And that's what rich people do. They leverage against their assets, they leverage against their debt to get more debt so they can make more money. And so that's good debt. That is how you play the game to your advantage. Of course, there's a lot more to this. I'm not trying to give you financial advice and tell you like go out and get $100,000 loan and buy some random house and rent it out for more than what you're paying. That would be horrible advice. There's a lot more into it, but I wanted to just kind of allow the viewer here to think aside a little bit of what we see in regards to debt in general and what we associate it with, and realize that there's more to it than just bad, and that it's not necessarily bad. It's not always bad, but yeah. Thanks, guys. I just wanted to change the scenery a little bit and get that out there. That good debt, bad debt, there's a difference. If you have more questions, I would say look at Rich Dad Poor Dad. He has a lot of good stuff on that. There's quite a few other places too, but that's one of the first ones that comes to my mind. That's what kind of sparked my introduction to good debt, bad debt. All right, thanks, guys.